Should the Lions trade Matthew Stafford? No. No, they shouldn't. Thanks for watching the video, you guys. If you like the content, subscribe. I've just been informed that I need something called factual evidence in order to prove a point, and I can't just state a claim without evidence and expect it to be reasonable. So I guess here's my evidence as to why the Lions should not trade Matthew Stafford. To preface this, I am not a Lions fan. I'm actually an Eagles fan, so this is really just an opinion from an outside perspective, and I have no real bias towards the Lions or Matthew Stafford. When talking about Matthew Stafford, there are two things you have to talk about. First, his play on the field, and second, his contract. We're going to talk about his play on the field first. Now, to get this started, I have Matthew Stafford as a top 15 QB in the NFL. I don't know why that's controversial to some people. I feel like he is a top 15 QB, and he's shown that in his career. And top 15 isn't even that high, actually. There's 32 NFL quarterbacks, and he's barely in the top half of that, so that shouldn't be that controversial. Now that we got that out of the way, I'm going to compare Matthew Stafford to players that I feel are similar to him in pedigree. And I'm going to start off by comparing him to Matt Ryan. As you can see, since 2011, Matthew Stafford has 218 touchdowns. Matt Ryan has 229 touchdowns, which about equates to about a one touchdown difference per season. And Matthew Stafford throws about one more interception per season than Matt Ryan. But overall, their stats are pretty close, and I'd say people think that Matt Ryan's a top 10 QB. The biggest difference, though, is win percentage. Matt Stafford has won 49.2% of his games since 2011, while Matt Ryan has won 53.9% of his games since 2011. That's obviously a pretty big difference. But if we go and compare Matt Stafford to another quarterback who people think is elite in Phillip Rivers, as you can see, stats-wise, Phillip Rivers throws about 2 touchdowns more per season, but he throws about almost 2 interceptions more per season, and he also has the same exact win percentage. So, as you can see, Phillip Rivers and Matthew Stafford had pretty comparable stats, and their win percentage is exactly the same at 49.2% since 2011. Both Matt Ryan and Phillip Rivers are considered top 10 quarterbacks, and Matthew Stafford has surprisingly similar numbers to both those players. One of the most underrated things about Matthew Stafford, though, is his clutch ability. Yeah, I know, Matthew Stafford and clutch, who would have thought? But Matthew Stafford actually has a historical, statistically proven clutch gene. Based on Pro Football Reference, 23.4% of Matthew Stafford's games end with him scoring points on a game-winning drive. That's almost half of all his wins in general. Now you may say, oh, I need to compare this to some other metric. And here you have it. Tom Brady in the regular season has a 16.4% game-winning drive percentage. Aaron Rodgers is at 12.1%. Drew Brees is at 18.2%. Now, I'm not going to say that Matthew Stafford is more clutch than Tom Brady, because obviously Tom Brady is the clutchest player of all time. He's done it on the biggest stage. But Matthew Stafford in the regular season has shown that he is a clutch player. Now, if you move on to fourth quarter comebacks, Matthew Stafford is the all-time single-season leader with 8 comeback wins in 2016, which is almost all his wins except for one that year. He single-handedly dragged the Lions to the playoffs that year. And he also has an 18.4% fourth quarter comeback per game rate, which is my own metric, 4 QCGs. Matt Ryan has a 15.5% rate. Tom Brady has a 13%. Aaron Rodgers has 8.5%. So Matthew Stafford has shown that he's a clutch player based on these statistics. Now you may say, he's not doing it in the playoffs. But one thing is, he's not making the playoffs a lot. He's only made it 3 times in his career. But you can't blame that on Matthew Stafford alone. One of the biggest things that people tend to forget about is that wins are team dependent. If you have a good team, you're going to make it more often than if you had a bad team. And even elite quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers, he's amazing. This season he had kind of a down year, but he still had a very good year compared to other quarterbacks. But the talent around him in general was just so lacking that they went 7-8-1, which was nowhere near being close to clinching a playoff berth. Again, comparing Matthew Stafford to Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan, he's had 18 Pro Bowlers outside of himself since 2011. You may think that's a pretty decent amount. 5 of those were Calvin Johnson and 3 of those were Ndamukong Suh. So he only had 10 other players who made the Pro Bowl. And one of them was a long snapper, I believe. So you have 9 actual players in 11 years other than Calvin Johnson and Ndamukong Suh. You might also say that Matthew Stafford has had very good wide receiver talent his entire career. Calvin Johnson, Golden Tate, Marvin Jones. Some even say Kenny Golladay, though I don't think that's a valid argument because Kenny Golladay is still a pretty young player. And he had his ups and downs last season. And you would be right, he kind of didn't do that well with Megatron. But the thing is, with a star wide receiver, it's almost like you're forced into feeding them. Look at OBJ, look at Antonio Brown. Those 2 players, before Juju for AB, they were force-fed. Look at Julio Jones, also force-fed, before the season where he had something in Calvin Ridley. Matthew Stafford made the playoffs immediately after Calvin Johnson retired, the season after, which would make his 3rd playoff appearance, meaning that he had 2 in the previous 5 seasons. That's kind of insane when you think about it. He did better without Calvin Johnson than he did with Calvin Johnson. I would also argue that he hasn't really underutilized the weapons he has. He utilized them pretty well, I'd say. Most of those players finished over 1,000 yards in every single season with Matthew Stafford. It's just that the team wasn't winning. And like I said, that's because they lacked overall talent. If you look at Matt Ryan, he had 26 Pro Bowlers compared to Stafford's 18. And 5 in 2016, which was his Super Bowl campaign, and 4 in 2017, where they again made the playoffs. If you look at Phillip Rivers, he had 19 Pro Bowlers since 2011, which is only 1 more than Matthew Stafford. But 7 of those came this season when they made the playoffs. You just need a big concentration of talent at one time in order to succeed. And the Lions have frankly never had that. And you can't blame Matthew Stafford solely for their losses when they just haven't been able to put up together a successful team. I also included Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger, who got 34 Pro Bowlers and 38 respectively. Most people would agree that the Patriots and the Steelers are both pretty successful teams, and as you can see, that's not only due to having 2 great quarterbacks, it's because they have overall talent at other positions on the field. Matt Stafford lacks that with his 18 Pro Bowlers in 8 years, and that's why they tend to lose more than they win. Matthew Stafford's contract, it's very hard to move him. According to Spotrac.com, as of this season, his cap hit is $29,500,000. Now, if he were to be cut, all of his signing bonus would convert automatically to a cap hit and would cost the Lions $30 million up front. So keeping him would be cheaper than cutting him or trading him. Now, if we look at 2020, his cap hit would be $31.5 million, but the cap hit will only be $20 million compared to $49 million in 2019. If they want to get out, the greatest chance is in 2021, where he'll only have $10 million in dead cap. But as of now, this season, it makes no sense to trade away your star quarterback and essentially start a rebuild in a very weak quarterback draft class. if you really want to risk it, maybe you can do it next year. You're going to end up losing a lot of money, but you're going to be in a better quarterback class with Tua Tagovailoa and hopefully Justin Herbert. And probably the best case scenario is if Stafford really falls off, just completely bombs it, drops the ball. The best thing you can do is get rid of him before the 2021 season, and maybe you have a chance of drafting a talent like Trevor Lawrence. But as of now, it makes no sense to financially get rid of Stafford. You're just going to be wasting money. So, to answer the question, should the Lions trade Matthew Stafford? My answer, no. At least not this season.